Welcome to Hetz Presents, an episode with Martin Miller. Martin, can you please give us your company, your role, and where your hometown is, where you're coming to us from?
Sure. Hi, Liz. Well, first, thank you for having me. I appreciate that. My name is Martin Miller, and I work as a fractional CTO. Most recently, I was also a director of artificial intelligence and machine learning production operations for Levi Strauss. And my current work is with a startup. It's seed level, working on a tech service using artificial intelligence as an enabler. I live in Pleasanton, California, in the United States.
Okay, so I'm going to ask you the first question, which is my favorite. What was your first job, and what did you learn there that you still use today?
Ooh. my my first job out of college was as an installation engineer for a magnetic resonance imaging company, and the name of that company was called Diasonics. I traveled
Wow.
all over the US and parts of Europe, installing these large imaging systems for scanning the body. And a couple years into the role, I transitioned into the quality assurance group and software QA for medical instruments at the time, which was pretty exciting. Oh boy. What did I learn and what do I still use today? I think was part of the question. Well, this is probably how I got to where I am today. I had a lot of opportunity to work with challenging personalities, building contractors, electricians, technicians, doctors, and investors, and I found it intriguing to use the mind mental training from my martial arts to help de-escalate very warm and heated discussions and conversations, and I still use it today.
Wow, that is really actually very interesting. I have interviewed someone else who had extensive martial arts training who had similar feelings. It sounds like anyone who's working a career should be doing some martial arts on the side. So, interesting trend. Great, something for all of us to learn there. So, getting into the engineering side of things, you've led a lot of engineering teams in your career across different industries, I noticed. What are some common themes or common insights you can share from across your various roles?
That's a really great question, and it's a good learning experience for everyone. But I've been fortunate to work with many types of teams, international, within the U.S. And let me state, I spent most of my career in startups. I am a startup person, and one of the most critical piece of a startup is cultivating a team, structuring, aligning, having the same common values, doing activities together, understanding there's a life cycle to a company and where you're at. And first and foremost, you need to spend time on your hiring decisions. Have many conversations with your candidates. Make the decision process something that is very well vetted out, test them out. Uh, another thing I learned from one specific startup, without calling them out, where I worked with the founders, were all from an Ivy League school, and they pretty much wanted everybody to be from an Ivy League school. Unfortunately, that startup didn't do so well, and I learned that sometimes you can try to coach people to go beyond the frame of reference that they have, but not always successfully. So that was actually one of my least enjoyable times in a startup. Just to put that out there.
Wow, that's interesting. Sort of like when things are too homogenous or, banking on something specific like that, it can actually kind of backfire. Diversity. Diversity is important.
Yeah, diversity in thinking.
Yeah. Well, speaking of diversity, actually, we at Hertz and I think the whole ecosystem is talking a lot about the shift left that's going on. And when we specifically think about AI and machine learning areas, a lot of companies, there's a lot of new people who are going to be touching data, touching these systems, especially developers. And that's where the shift left comes in. So when it comes to all this usage and accountability, do you think developers are prepared for this? What are some of the things we need to see for that to happen? It can be kind of nerve wracking to think about it, but as far as tooling best practices, how can teams get ready for this shift? That's already happening.
Sure. So the criticality of data has never been felt more than it is now. And data comes in all forms. You create pipelines for it. you derive it or read or transform it from data you may already have or third-party data sources. And there could be access to information that has information that should be protected, regionally, private, personally identifiable information, financial information, et cetera. Everybody needs to be educated on the processes around protecting data, data governance, data protection, and the criticality of data is an asset, and it's your gold, it's the oil that drives a company to making decisions with intelligence.
Yeah, that's a good metaphor. Okay, this is kind of I think there's a lot of people talking about this, but I'm kind of curious about your take. Dispel a myth for us. What is something, and we know a lot of these, but the public, the media, everyone else are getting completely wrong about what's going on with AI today. What's something you wish we all understood better?
AI is not taking over the world yet.
Comforting.
Maybe next week with the next update of Bard and ChatGPT, just to comfort you, so you have at least another week to live without it. Um,
Okay.
that's one. Generally speaking, I don't believe AI is going to cause unemployment, but one way I like to say this is, and I'll give it a modality, and this is from my own podcast where I spoke with a lawyer that actually had a data science background, and we talked about lawyers won't be replaced by AI, but lawyers that use AI will replace lawyers that don't use AI, if that makes sense. That's that, and all you have to do is replace the lawyer with whatever the job's focus is or modality, and you can start to put this together to make sense.
Yeah, I actually personally I say the same thing. I feel that it's not that all of us content people will necessarily be out of jobs automatically. No one wants to post a chat GPT article as is, but if I can become an AI operator, I will still have another 20 years to my career versus somebody else that doesn't actually pay attention. So yes, I completely get that on my side.
Absolutely. And another myth piece, which a lot of people are concerned with, they're calling AI not safe, right? And it's just saying not safe. And that's a function of several artifacts that happen when the hallucination scenarios happen, or the data set that's used to pull out the information you think you're pulling out doesn't make sense. And so with the right guardrails, we can have a lot of safety in our AI.
Yeah, that makes sense. Like a lot of other things we've gone through as humans. um, So, as somebody who's managed tons of teams, and especially now that there seems to be, at least from the VC standpoint, company after company rolling out with new tools and new applications for all this stuff we're seeing come up, how do you go through the process of choosing which tools to use, which tools to implement? There's a lot of like data and AI tools that we're obviously seeing since we're heavy in the space. How do you keep from like tooling distraction, or how do you keep your teams focused on that?
Well, interesting. Tooling distraction's been here forever. Think of just development languages. If you did an array of every development language available, and I'm starting from ground zero, where should I start? And then you step back and you ask yourself, what makes sense for what I'm going to do with this development language? And then figure out, oh, are there jobs that actually use that development language? If someone made up their own personal development language, it would be difficult to want to learn that if no one would find it as an employable skill. Now, with with AI tooling today, the people are using English as the new programming language, right? And that I find very interesting. So coming back to the origin of your question, yeah, I'm inundated constantly by observability tools, explainability tools, better ways to productionalize or run ML ops around model tools, and it's difficult to jump on the bandwagon and just say, hey, I'm going to try this tool just for the fun of it without having a definitive what I'm going to get out of it. Does it going to drive value? Am I going to save money? Is it going to make performance better? You really need to kind of put a matrix together. What are you trying to accomplish? What are your end goals? And, as far as where I can find some of this information, LinkedIn has turned into, kind of a lead gen engine for the industry, but it also, a lot of people are putting out their Stack Overflow posts, their Medium posts, et cetera, and sharing knowledge. And of course, I subscribe to many pages. I take in a lot of information. I go to conferences, I talk on my podcast, I meet interesting people. And you know what's really interesting, Liz? You learn a lot about what's going on when you just close your mouth and listen. And that's what I spend a lot of time doing.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's great advice, I think, for everybody. Speaking of all these things you're seeing and hearing about, what's a solution you haven't found yet or that you wish existed, or maybe even you'd go out and build it?
You know, there's always room to build a better mousetrap. You know, more intelligent, cleaner, more humane, etc. Let's talk about user interface. You know, most tooling has a learning curve, and anything that helps drive the user interface to an ease of onboarding of usage, how to build a workflow better, is definitely worth an evaluation point and feeling that to create it. And using the LMM, the large language models today, you could actually apply your user interface differently and improve the experience instead of 20,000 tabs across the top and 7 drop downs in each one. You could just say, hey, I want to find this. Instead of a Google search of 50 links, I'm going to get one poignant link to what I need. And I would love to build that for you.
Cool. Now, switching over to startups, you said you're a startup guy at heart, and I get it. I'm a startup girl at heart as well. You've probably spoken to many startup founders, people pitching to you. What is either or uh, a mistake you see founders making when they're pitching to CTOs and other execs? Or what's a really good example of a founder doing it right?
Okay. So everybody should step back and realize that they're coming from a point of reference that's within their own mindset. And they're trying to share that mindset with others to come on board to either participate or invest in or potentially purchase, a good or service. At the end of this, not being clear of what you're trying to say, how you state it, is a deal killer right away. You need to be prepared. You're not expected to know everything. You don't need to know all your competition. Your 5-year pro forma, that's sometimes the silliest thing to ever see people talk about when they're in their earliest phase at seed level. We're talking about the next 6 months, not the next 5 years. And I find that funny to see that, worrying about cap tables that early. Uh, and because I do work with a lot of founders, being open to feedback and feedback from many mentors, peers, potential customers, and listening to what pain points are happening. Does your solution fit it? Are we trying to put a Phillips head screwdriver on something that needs a hammer? And there's no screw fastener to use, and you're going to use a hammer. You got to listen very carefully to that feedback. And being collaborative. The magic of the best founders I've worked with, they're collaborative, and they're employing me or others for our wisdom and our ability to execute and help sell with them. And that's sort of the magic. If you need to make a business, you need to be able to sell something.
Yeah, I definitely think collaborative and feedback is something that we see ourselves as people who tend to be giving feedback to early founders as well. Great. And flipping over as the fractional CTO and all of your experience managing, what is a piece of advice you would give to someone building their first engineering team today?
Well, it comes back to that comment I made earlier about your hires. Spend a little time, share your vision, listen to the people that you're looking to bring aboard, and make sure you define a common goal, common objectives, and recruit with that shared vision and commit to achieving the goals. We can talk about culture, but culture is something that evolves, and hiring the right people will evolve over time. You want to be clear and concise on what expectations are and not micromanage in all cases. You want to empower your team. I want to be able to go off and help fundraise with the CEO of a company, or come back and help sell with the biz dev team of a company, while developers are actually implementing things in the background. And I come back and then immerse myself and going, all right, here we are. Let's start playing test games and start looking at, does this thing meet the expectation, and driving that together. And then after all of this, every small win, you want to celebrate it. You don't need to overdo the celebration, but just, praise and feedback to the team.
Awesome. Yeah, that's great. Love it. When doing my research on you, I noticed that you've done some animal rescue in your past. I'm curious if you have any lessons we can apply to tech from that kind of work.
Empathy, compassion. I don't want to say animals are people too, but let's just feel that there's a personality that gives love unconditional, and you should be prepared for almost anything when you come into animal rescue, and be giving and accepting. You know, it's just like working in a team in tech. You want to communicate with the people around you, because you might your end goal is to potentially adopt an animal out to a new home, and so any characteristics or behaviors of the animal that you can help cultivate that helps them successfully transition is really important to their journey.
Awesome. I feel that. And finally, after all this business talk, let's hear what you like to do for fun.
Oh my goodness. Well, let me give you the one that I wear on my sleeve. If you're a little closer here, I own Vespa scooters. I have four of them, and I joined.
Wow, that's fun.
Yeah, two two wheel beasts. 14 and 23 horsepower are the two ratings of my the scooter types I have, and joined a local club here. We'll call it the Vesperados, and we travel around the Livermore Valley, mainly around a lot of the wineries and the back roads. It's really fun, and hanging out with those people. It's like a gang.
That's awesome. That's such a good weekend after all that engineering team management. Good for you.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you so much, Martin, for sharing your wisdom, sharing some great examples with us and with our founders. Thanks for joining us on Hetz Presents.
Thank you, Liz. It was a pleasure.